Adrian Cole never liked mornings. The sun hurt his eyes, the quiet hurt his ears. And the empty house, that hurt more than anything. He sat alone in the living room, staring at a photograph on the wall. A smiling woman, a child. He didn't remember their names. He only remembered the accident, the guilt, the silence that followed. The bell rang, one sharp, quick ring. Adrian didn't move. The bell rang again. He hated disturbances. But the sound came again, softer this time. His maid had arrived. Clara. She was small, quiet, and careful. Her hands were rough from work. Her eyes were soft, but sharp enough to notice things. She didn't look at the photograph. She didn't look at the empty house. She only bowed slightly and said, "Good morning, sir." "Morning," Adrian muttered. His voice was low, tired. Clara moved fast, efficiently. She cleaned the living room, straightened the books on the shelf, wiped the dust from the corners where sunlight couldn't reach. Adrian watched her, but didn't speak. She worked like someone who had seen too much of the world too soon. And she didn't ask questions. That was why he liked her. But today something felt different. Adrian felt it in his chest, a cold tightening, like he knew a secret was about to be found. And he was right. Clara stopped by the desk, her hand hovering over a small stack of papers. She didn't touch them. She looked at him, her eyes curious but careful. "You left this here, sir," she said softly, handing him a folded letter. Adrian's fingers trembled slightly, not because of fear, but because of the memory the letter carried. Clara didn't know yet. She didn't know what the letter said, who it was about. She only knew that she had entered a house that held shadows. And some shadows weren't meant to be disturbed, but she would. Clara moved through the mansion like it was her own home, though it had never been. She opened windows, letting the morning light spill across the polished floors. She dusted the shelves and rearranged books on the study desk. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to be quiet. Adrian stayed in his chair, watching her. He never spoke much. He didn't know why he watched her, but he did. Something about her presence felt different, alive, honest. "You work too hard," he said finally, his voice low, almost a whisper. Clara paused, her hand on a stack of papers. She didn't look at him. "It's my job, sir," she replied simply. Adrian sighed, leaning back. He hated people who felt sorry for him. He hated people who pitied him. But Clara, she felt nothing. The mansion was full of silence, too much silence, rooms that had never been lived in, paintings that had never been hung straight, dust that had never been cleaned. But Clara changed that. Slowly, quietly, carefully. And then she saw it. A small, folded letter hidden under a pile of old papers on the desk. It wasn't just any letter. The edges were worn, yellowed. The handwriting was familiar, strange in its own way. She picked it up. The name at the bottom made her heart stop. Her hands shook, but she didn't show it. She folded it carefully and slipped it into her pocket. She didn't open it. Not yet. Adrian noticed her pause. "What is it?" he asked. Clara smiled faintly, a small, controlled smile. "Nothing, sir. Just some papers I was organizing." He didn't believe her. He never did. But he said nothing. Clara went on with her work. She cleaned, arranged, and dusted. But the letter burned in her pocket. She didn't know why it felt so important. She didn't know that this one piece of paper would change everything between them. For now, Adrian returned to his photograph. The woman, the child, the guilt, the quiet. and the knowledge that soon his carefully hidden past would meet the one person who could destroy him or forgive him. Days passed in the mansion, each one quiet, each one heavy. Clara worked from morning until evening. She cleaned, cooked, and polished, but she never left the desk alone. That letter burned in her pocket, a secret she couldn't ignore. Finally, one evening, when Adrian had left for a meeting, she pulled the letter out. Her hands trembled. She unfolded it carefully. The words hit her like a punch. "The accident was my fault. I can only hope this compensation helps your family. I will never forget what I have done." Clara's heart stopped. She sank to the floor, clutching the paper. The handwriting, the date, the photograph she had found earlier. It was all connected. Her mother, the woman who had died when she was a child, and Adrian Cole, he had caused it. For a moment, rage filled her, then sadness, then something worse, confusion. She didn't know whether to hate him or pity him. She didn't know if she should run, scream, or wait. She chose to wait. The next morning, Adrian returned. He didn't know she had found the letter. She greeted him as always, calm and polite, though inside she was a storm. "Morning, sir," she said. "Morning," he replied, looking tired. He rubbed his eyes, not noticing her unusual quietness. Clara worked in silence. She watched him from the kitchen doorway. He moved slowly, as if the house itself weighed him down. She noticed the way he paused by the window, staring at the empty garden. She noticed the slight tremble in his hands when he picked up a cup of tea. Something inside her softened. He wasn't the monster she had imagined. He was broken, alone. Guilt written on every line of his face. Still, the secret was there, heavy between them. A wall of truth that could fall at any moment. Days passed. Clara kept the letter hidden. She watched Adrian in small ways, how he poured tea, how he cleaned his glasses, how he avoided mirrors. She learned his routines. She learned his silence. And slowly, she began to understand him. He wasn't cruel. He was lonely. He was afraid. And he had been living with the weight of her mother's death for years. Clara didn't forgive him. Not yet. But she didn't hate him either. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't felt since her mother died: curiosity. And that curiosity would pull her deeper into the mansion, and deeper into Adrian's life. Clara moved quietly through the mansion every day, careful not to disturb Adrian. She dusted, polished, and arranged everything as usual, but her mind was never on the work. It was on him. She noticed things no one else would. The way he would pause in the hallway, staring at the empty walls, lost in thought. The way he would leave small envelopes on the table, clearly meant for people he never met. Poor families, orphanages, strangers in need. He did these things quietly, without recognition, without pride. Clara began to feel a strange pity. Adrian Cole, the man who had taken her mother from her, was kind, in some ways painfully so. One afternoon, she found him in the study, his hands shaking as he tried to light a cigarette. He didn't see her at first. She stayed in the doorway, watching silently. "Why do I do this to myself?" he whispered, staring at a photograph of a smiling woman. Not her mother, but someone else from his past. "Why can't I just move on?" Clara's heart ached. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She didn't let him know she had found the letter, that she knew everything. Days turned into a week. Slowly, Adrian began to notice her more, not in a bossy, commanding way, but in small glances, fleeting moments where he seemed grateful for her presence. One evening, he called her into the study. "Clara," he said quietly, not looking at her, "sit down. I, I don't know why I say these things, but you seem different from the others. You notice things. You care." Clara's hands tightened in her lap. She wanted to speak, to warn him, to tell him she knew. But she didn't. She only nodded. "I don't deserve anyone to care about me," he continued, voice breaking slightly. "I've done terrible things. Maybe more than you'll ever know." Clara swallowed. She felt a strange warmth, a strange connection. He was not the monster she had imagined, yet he carried the weight of the monster's crime she'd always hated. For the first time, she wondered if people like him could ever truly change, and she wondered if she could forgive him. The mansion felt quieter than usual that morning. Adrian sat at the dining table, staring at his untouched breakfast. Clara placed a cup of tea in front of him, her hand steady, her eyes calm. "Sir, you should eat," she said softly. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in days. His face was tired, pale and lined with worry. I'm not hungry," he muttered. Clara didn't push. She simply poured herself a cup of tea and sat across from him, silently keeping him company. Days passed like this. She worked, he watched. They exchanged few words, but something had changed. Adrian began to rely on her presence even without admitting it. He began leaving small notes for her, reminders, instructions, even little personal thoughts he couldn't tell anyone else. One evening he came into the kitchen, his coat heavy, his hands trembling slightly. "Clara," he said, voice low, almost fragile, "can I speak to you?" She nodded. She followed him to the study, where the soft light of the lamp painted shadows on the walls. He paused, struggling with his words. "I've never told anyone, but I've done terrible things. Things I can't take back, things I regret every single day." Clara's heart beat faster. She knew, she had known for days. She wanted to stop him, to warn him, to hide the truth. But she didn't. She wanted to hear him, to see the man behind the wealth, the mansion, and the power. "I try to help people," he continued, almost whispering. "But it's never enough." It will never be enough. Clara felt a strange sadness. She had imagined revenge, hatred, anger. But looking at him now, she saw something else, a broken man, drowning in guilt. She didn't forgive him yet. She wasn't ready. But she began to understand him. From that day, their bond shifted. She worked quietly, but she also watched for his moods, his needs, the little moments where he revealed himself. She noticed how he paused to look at a bird outside, how he lingered over a song on the radio, how he seemed to long for something he could never have. And slowly Adrian began to change too. He smiled more, small fleeting smiles. Only for her. He asked her opinion about things he never asked anyone else. He even laughed once, softly, at a joke she had made. But the secret still lingered between them, unspoken, heavy like a storm waiting to fall. Clara knew she couldn't stay silent forever. One day the truth would come out, and when it did, everything would change. Yet for now they remained like this, two broken people under one roof, sharing quiet moments, neither fully trusting the other, but both learning to lean on someone else for the first time in years. The mansion felt colder than usual that morning. Adrian was in the study, coughing violently. Clara rushed to his side, helping him sit down in the armchair. His face was pale, sweat dampening his hair. "You should see a doctor, sir," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I Can't, he whispered. I don't want anyone to see me like this. I'm weak. Clara's heart ached. She had watched him struggle with guilt, loneliness, and pride, but now she saw how fragile he truly was. Days passed and Adrian's condition worsened. One evening, he called Clara into the study. His hands were shaking as he reached for a chair, and he looked at her with eyes full of fear and regret. Clara, I need to tell you something, he said quietly. Something I should have told long ago. Something I've buried in my heart for too long. Clara felt her pulse quicken. She had known the truth for days, but she stayed silent, waiting for him to speak in his own way. He swallowed hard. Years ago, I caused an accident. A woman. She died because of me. I thought I could fix it with money, with silence, but it never went away. I live with her death every day. Clara's hands gripped the edge of the desk. Her mother. She had always wondered who was responsible. Now she knew he was confessing, but he didn't know she already knew. You were her daughter, Adrian continued, voice breaking, and I am so sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I only want you to know I have regretted it every day. Clara's chest tightened. Rage, grief, and pity collided inside her. She could have shouted, could have told him everything she knew, could have taken revenge. But looking at him now, broken, fragile, and full of sorrow, she felt something else. Mercy. You don't need my forgiveness, she said softly, but I see you. I see the man who is trying, in his own way, to be better. That is enough. Adrian's eyes filled with tears. He reached for her hand, and she allowed it, letting him hold her palm as if clinging to the last light in his life. The next morning, Adrian passed away quietly in his sleep. No pain, no anger, only peace. Clara stayed in the mansion for a few days, sorting his belongings, reading his letters, and packing the money he had left behind. But she didn't keep it all. She gave most of it to orphanages, to poor families, to anyone who needed it more than she did. All she kept was a small watch from his desk, a reminder of the man who had caused her pain, but also of the man she had learned to understand and forgive. Walking away from the mansion, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Freedom from hatred, from grief, from the heavy weight of a secret. And though the mansion stood empty behind her, the memory of him, the lonely, guilty, and quietly kind millionaire, stayed with her forever.